did, but it's a very short point.
Yes.
Just to remind the inspector, this is dealing with the chromium-6 emissions.
Oh, that's not my rebuttal.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Forgive me. That's my
SO6.
SO6.
Yes.
Now, this is predicated on you acknowledging the distinction between the proposed plan and municipal waste incineration plants, which you in the preceding paragraph.
Yes, I was acknowledging that the EA guidance note relates to municipal waste incinerators, and this is not one of those.
And so you identify another facility that isn't a municipal waste incinerator, and that's Stevens Croft Wood-fired Power Station.
Correct.
Now, what we know about Stevens Croft Wood-fired Power Station is that it burns a different feedstock.
It burns a mixture of waste wood and virgin wood.
And it's going to burns far less waste wood than is proposed for the present site.
It burns a variable amount. It tends to burn less, yes.
And that will have consequences for the emission of copper, chrome, arsenic.
Possibly. The reason I say possibly, and again we may find the reference necessary, is that copper, chromium, arsenic treated wood, which is grade D wood, is specified as hazardous waste, which we are not allowed to burn. The only way in which that would be coming in is if it's a small part of a general mixture. So I just wanted to clarify, not that the plant take large loads on that type of wood.
But that would have consequences. That differential of input will have will have an effect for the concentrations of chromium-6.
Yes, it is possible that therefore this plant would release more chromium than Stevens Croft. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cunnington. Can we just, while we're on SO6, if I can ask my question relating to that now, then Mr. Kingston can pick anything up in the examination he needs to, and that, I think that might actually deal with any questions I have with the extensive cross-examination.
Excuse me, sir.
What I...
Could I just make one point, please? It was mentioned that lorries carrying material were going close to residential properties near Stroke Gardens. The area is a lot wider than that. I live on Beckler Way. And if you follow the line of the motorway around,
okay. Will you be making a statement to the inquiry? Have you registered to make a statement? Can you make that point when it's at that time, and I'll take full note of it then. That's fine. Yeah. What I'd just like you to do is to go to 221 of SO6, and can you take me through what you've done there, step 3, the case-specific scenario?
Certainly.
And we're talking about, chromium-6, which is elsewhere referred to as chromium.
That's right, chromium-6 or hexavalent. So, right, so I think the best way to do that. Okay, so in step 3, we've carried out the case-specific scenario, where the Environment Agency says we can then use lower chromium emissions and lower chromium background levels if those can be justified. Okay.
And I think you said that you now accept partially what Dr. Rabe says, that 0.7% is not appropriate.
For background concentration, I agree with Dr. Rabe on that, and I agree that subsequent to this application, I've used high numbers as the guidance has developed effectively. So, my view is that the background concentration of chromium-6 is somewhere between 0.15 and 0.4. So that's point B in 221. Point A, where we're calculating the process contribution, that is based on the emission concentration of chromium-6 specifically of 0.035 micrograms per cubic meter. value which appears in the Environment Agency's Appendix B. So that's where that comes from. And then I have calculated the process contribution of 0.000787 nanograms, quite simply by scaling the concentration of the other chromium concentration.
From 1224. So that's specific to this.
That's specific to this station. 1224 shows the concentrations, the process contribution from the metals. The metals are released at a particular concentration, and so therefore the chromium-6 levels can be calculated by scaling.
Okay. Yeah.
And then in C, I've added two numbers together to get the predicted environmental concentration. So,
okay. Just on B, the background concentration of chromium-6 was sort of calculated at 0.15 to 0.4 nanograms per cube. That's dependent on whether you take the figure of 3% as the proportion.
That's 3% or 8%.
Chromium-6 or 8%.
Yes.
And you say 12% ought to be taken, but there are reasons why chromium-6.
Yes, but if we go back to 214, 12% comes from the National Atmospheric Emissions Inventory, which is the estimated proportion of chromium-6 in all chromium emissions from, I think, mainly process industries.
Yeah.
But there is a further comment about that in the EPAC's guidance, I think it is, that the proportions of chromium-6 and cadmium-10 may be lower than that measured in emissions, and that is because hexavalent chromium reduces to chromium-3 in the atmosphere. It doesn't go the other way.
And does that explain, because Dr. Rabe says background concentrations might be underestimated by a higher factor, does that explain?
He does. I think Dr. Rabe uses a figure of 25%, but that came from water emissions and then a little bit of some assumptions about how water, so that came from concentrations in water and some assumptions about how that might relate to concentrations in air. So I was getting probably more speculative along the line.
Okay. So in C, that again relates to the difference between whether it's 3. If it's 3%, it would be 151.
Yes,
if it was 8%, it would be 4.
So with 8%, then yes, then we have a situation where the contribution is less than 1%.
Yeah.
But the current back level may well be higher than the environmental assessment back level.
And then in 224, you say, I do not agree entirely that I accept the chromium-6 levels may exceed the EAL by a factor of 2 or less for the reasons you've given.
Yes.
And that's background concentration.
Yes, the background concentration, yes.
And then you go on to say that you disagree with Dr. Rabe's conclusion. So can you summarise what the consequences of that calculation is, that process you've gone through at 221, is for your assessment of the health?
It means that my conclusion doesn't change. So now, having applied the most recent guidance available, I continue to conclude that chromium-6 emissions would have an insignificant impact, and therefore that follows through that the health impact would not be significant.
So regardless of the background level concentration, whether it's...
Yes, the fact that the background level is potentially higher than the EAL is an issue to note. It doesn't mean that we should therefore not implement this plan.
But what's your view? Do you understand why residents might be concerned.
I do understand. Yes, I do understand why residents might be concerned, and it leads to a point which has been made a number of times. I think that while there are areas which may have high levels of pollution, air quality management area being an example, while actually the chromium 6 level we're talking here in Manchester is not unusual for cities, so probably quite a lot of the urban population is experiencing this. This doesn't mean that we should say, right, in that case we should stop. We can't possibly add any ridiculously small extra bit. So that is, I suppose, the planning point that comes from that, in my opinion, and the permitting point, that we haven't taken the view from guidance and general policy that we should stop doing everything.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Kingston, do you have any reason?
So I think to go back to the beginning and we'll deal with matters in the way in which they arose with you. The first matter that was dealt with was the plant and the way in which it was disposed on the site, to recollect by reference to the statement of common ground. One of the things it's common ground that the Environment Agency has to do is to ensure, in discharging its responsibilities, that the process being used is the best available technique. Yes? And we know, again, as a matter of background, that the context for that is the requirements of the Waste Incineration Directive and the UK legislation that follows from that.
And the BBC Directive legislation that follows from that as well.
Absolutely. Do get it out if you want to, but it's something that we've referred to at an earlier stage. It's called document 87, it's the Waste Incineration Directive. Quite simply by reference to the same recital we referred to earlier, which is on the first page, right-hand column, and recital 7. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
It says, as a consequence of what's gone before, therefore a high level of environmental protection and human health protection requires the setting and maintaining of stringent operational conditions, technical requirements, and emission limit values for plants incinerating or co-incinerating waste within the community. The limit values set should prevent or limit, as far as practical, negative effects on the environment and resulting risks to human health. And it's that wording, as far as practicable, in the context of what's gone before, I want to ask you about. In looking at this proposal, as you understand it, what approach will the agency have taken in terms of reducing emissions to, as far as practicable, reduce negative effects? What approach will they have taken?
The approach they will have taken is to consider the technical options available for reducing and abating emissions and evaluate their effectiveness and whether it is practicable for those to be brought through.
And in terms of the disposition of the plant on the site, will the disposition of the plant have been considered in that context or not? That is, in terms of ensuring that negative effects are reduced as far as possible.
Yes, it will have been, I think, because it is something that can be done. So yes, that will have been considered.
Yes. And in relation to, and let's take a specific matter as to whether or not the agency have had regard to it in terms of the disposition of the plant and the setting of limits, considering stack heights and things like that. If we take up core document 67 97B. And go to page 92. Do you see on page 92, under 6.6, setting ELVs and other permit conditions, the first item referred to is local factors. Yes.
Yes.
And we can see there explicitly a reference to the AQMA.
We can, yes.
If we go back to page 11. We can see under 4.1.2, the site, the second paragraph, a reference to the stack height, and in order to protect the adjacent air quality management area and emissions of oxides of nitrogen will be controlled well below the width limits.
Yes.
So what's the position, please? Have the Environment Agency explicitly taken into account local factors such as the existence of the AQMA or not?
They have, yes.
And in taking that into account, have they taken into account, so far as you can see, the characteristics of the site and any limitations on stack height or not?
As far as I can see from this sentence, yes.
Yeah. You'll recollect a little later on, you were asked about the position at Ince Marshes.
I was, yes.
And you told us that at Ince Marshes, the stack height had been set at a very much higher level, I think 85 metres.
Yes.
And that in order to take account of the proximity to the Mersey estuary special area of conservation.
Yes.
Yes. That's the part. To what extent, if at all, is that, looking at the Ince Marshes, an example of taking into account local circumstances in regulating the process and the scale or otherwise of equipment on site?
It is again a good example of that. The stack height of 85 metres was appropriate for protecting the local SAC and was appropriate in its context.
We know, Mr. Oaken, from earlier evidence that one of the tasks of the Environment Agency, and indeed it's apparent from paragraph 27 of PPS 10, one of the tasks of the Environment Agency is to protect human health and protect the environment.
Yes.
If the agency reached the conclusion that there is a technique with regard to either plant disposition, plant complement, or other regulatory element of the process, which will protect the environment or human health in a way that's considered necessary, can you explain on what basis the agency would not put such measures in place? Would there be any basis for not doing so?
No, their objective is to protect the environment and human health, so no.
Thank you. The next matter relates to what was put to you as a common position with regard to nitrogen dioxide levels within the AQMA. And the question was initially put on a very broad basis that within the AQMA, nitrogen dioxide levels were in excess of 40 micrograms per metre cube. You gave some qualification to that. and I just want to look at the extent to which that broad proposition might require to be qualified by reference, please, to your appendices, and this is your original appendix, Appendix 2. Appendix 2 should consist of two figures, figure 3.3 and 3.4, dealing respectively with the annual mean nitrogen dioxide monitoring for 3-year average concentration 2007-2009 and 7-year average concentration 2005-2011.
That's right, yes.
And we can see from the legend that the legend moves through green, red, yellow, and sort of orangey brown.
Yes.
Just looking at the diagram itself, or the figure itself, first point, does the air quality management area cover the whole of Trafford Borough, or indeed the whole of Salford Borough?
No, it doesn't.
We're going to come back to it later, but in the blue NG case, did the air quality management area cover the whole of the borough concern?
I think so. I'm not actually certain. I have to check, but I think so.
Looking here, we can see the dots that appear within the air quality management area, and the air quality management area, broadly speaking, follows the transport corridors.
It does, yes.
And do you see, for example, starting in the bottom right,
3.3 or 3.4?
3.3, bottom right, at Ernston, there is a yellow dot.
There is, yes.
Within the AQMA, and indicating concentration below objective, that is 30 to 36 micrograms.
That's right.
Yes. We go further up, we've got a red dot indicating above, but then moving, as it were, top and slightly centre right to the Trevor Road monitoring point.
Yes.
We've got an orange or browning dot, yes, which is indicating concentration just below objective.
It is.
Yes. Further to the right, and just above where it says Eccles, we've got another concentration below objective. Yes?
Yes.
Looking at the top of the diagram, and top centre to start with, we've got adjacent to each other concentration below objective and a concentration above objective next to each other, one I suspect rather closer to the motorway than the other.
Yes.
And then out to the top left, we've got another orange concentration just below objective.
We did.
Yes?
Yes.
Looking at that diagram, we can see very clearly 4 red dots within the AQMA. Yes?
Yes.
But on the basis of what we've just been through, we've got 4 dots indicating monitoring locations where the level is below 40 micrograms.
Yeah, we've been through 5, and there's another one just sneaking up the top, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. In those circumstances, is it appropriate to characterise the air quality management area as being an area where universally the air quality is such that nitrogen dioxide levels are above 40 micrograms per metre cube?
No.
For completeness, let's turn over the page and have a look.
I don't think we need to go through dot by dot.
Pretty cool. The answer is 7 red, 3 3 read and 7 not.
Yeah.
So I won't go through it dot by dot, but I just invite you to note, and I'm going to ask the same question, Mr. Oakham, on a 7-year average concentration basis, is it appropriate or fair to characterise the area within the AQMA as being one where there is universally a level above 40 micrograms per metre cube?
No, it isn't.
Next, we need to deal with the DEFRA submission and the questions you were asked about that. It is a matter of fact. If the fact is wrong, someone will no doubt correct it. But I think the DEFRA submission was made on the 27th of September 2011.
I think that's probably true.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the decision document which we've been referred to was the 26th of June 2012. If the submission date was the 27th of September 2011, should we proceed, Mr. Oakham, on the basis that the government willfully and knowingly submitted to the European Commission information which it knew to be out of date or inaccurate?
That would seem a dangerous way to proceed.
Notwithstanding all that's been put to you about that submission, is there any evidence before this inquiry from any objector or any other organisation that the consequence of any of the factors referred to in cross-examination would render the DEFRA material any less reliable? Is there any data, any reassessment which indicates that the DEFRA data would be wrong or unreliable?
No, I don't believe there is any data or reassessment that does that.
So, with regard to the factors that Mr. Fraser put to you, is there anything which would allow either the inspector in this instance or the Secretary of State to say that the DEFRA information was wrong and could not be relied upon because there was some calculation or some assessment which showed it to be the case?
No. No.
Thank you. Next, we had some questions which went to Barton, and we had some references to Barton and the health of the Barton population.
We don't yet.
We know that we've had representations here from the local primary care trust. Yes?
Yes.
That is the local health authority. To what extent, if at all, do you think we could suppose that the local health authority would be cognizant of any relevant aspects of the health of local people?
I would have thought that would be what they're there to do, so they should know that.
So if we look to see, have the local health authority raised any objection based on any knowledge of the health of the local population, what's the answer?
I don't believe they have.
Take up then, would you please, your supplementary appendices.
My rebuttal appendices?
Yes.
Yes.
And go to Appendix 1. And page 6. In the middle of the page, there's a paragraph starting, there are 2 important sources of information. Do you see that?
I do.
There are 2 important sources of information that should be used to judge whether the proposed Barton plant will adversely affect the local population. A, comparison of bottled data against the standards two points need to be emphasised. In setting the standards, the potential for effects on the developing fetus and young children are taken into account. And the second, the standards are very conservative and are therefore protective of the health of all members of the local population. In saying all members of the local population, Mr. Oakham, what's your understanding? Does that include young, old, infirm, fit, healthy?
My understanding is it includes all members of the population. It's intended to include those who are sensitive to air pollutants.
Go to the top of the next page, would you please, under the heading Setting the Standards. The establishment of a safe, virtually safe, acceptable exposure level for a particular chemical is required in order to judge the possible health implications of exposure to particular levels of that chemical. Such standards are set on the basis of data on the adverse effects of the chemical and the dose-response relationship to the most sensitive effect of the most vulnerable life stage. Often vulnerable life stage means early childhood, but can also be puberty, pregnancy or aging stage. Yes?
Yeah.
If we just, with that in mind, default again to the Waste Incineration Directive and it's called Document 87, and the recital we referred to earlier, which starts, as we noted, with the reference to a high level of environmental protection and human health protection. It requires the setting and maintaining of stringent operational conditions, technical requirements and emission limit values for plants and so on. The limit values set should prevent or limit as far as practical negative effects on the environment and the resulting risk to human health. Does the waste incineration set emission levels for, among other things, nitrogen dioxide?
It does, yeah.
As well as a range of other chemicals?
Yeah.
If those are set on the basis of a high level of human health protection and stringent operational conditions, what in your view, what basis is there in your view for suggesting that plants which meet those stringent levels will nonetheless have adverse effects?
I don't think there is any basis for that.
Just take up, if you would, Mr. Watson's proof of evidence. This is just to deal with perhaps a small point on scale, but we'll come back to a bit later on. But if you go to page 93 of 104, this should be or include a map, does it?
It does, yes.
Looking at the map, we can see that the blue line is the ward boundary.
Yes.
Boundary. And our attention was being drawn to the more darkly coloured, dark red bits, yes?
Yes.
Within the ward. And we can see the scale of area being referred to. Is the dark coloured area covering the whole ward, or only a part of it?
It covers a part of it.
Yeah. Just take up core document 150, would you please, which is the blue NG decision letter and inspector's report. Sorry. go in the inspector's report, would you, to paragraph 10.3.17. It's on page 45. And the end of paragraph 10.3.17, please, the last sentence. The 3 wards closest to the site are high on the most recent index of multiple deprivation. I consider local residents might therefore suffer disproportionate health effects due to the proposal. But there, the inspector was looking at 3 wards.
Yes.
In terms of an area which is being drawn attention to, does 3 wards look comparable with the parts of 1 ward to which Mr. Watson has drawn attention?
On the assumption that wards are generally the same size, no.
Thank you. You can put that to one side for a moment. We're going to come back to it later. The next matter relates to questions put to you about areas of poor health and the impact of the proposal. I want to ask you, because I cross-examined into this issue twice in the first week of the inquiry, what's your understanding of the Council's case, Mr. Oakham? Does it relate to the perception of health effects of the proposal or an allegation of actual health effects of the proposal?
I understand it relates to the perception of health effects. And that they specifically do not allege actual health effects.
And in the context of protection against actual health effects, how relevant or not, in your view, is the material we've just been referring to from the Waste Incineration Directive and from Professor Bridges about the basis upon which standards are set?
I think it is very relevant because it demonstrates that the Waste Incineration Directive and the standards are set to protect all people of whatever health level.
Just then take up, would you please, CPS 10, which is 4.143. I do beg your pardon. Hold on. I'm so sorry. I'm afraid I've got a different court document number on it from a different inquiry. It's a good example of recycling, actually. Yeah, reuse. Yes, reuse, definitely. Good. And the point I'm dealing with is the point that was put to you, Mr. Oakham, that Mr. Fraser put it, with regard to nitrogen dioxide, there are no safe levels, was part of the cross-examination, and that later on scientists are still debating it and so on. Now, I just want to look and see the extent to which that approach is or is not consistent with the Secretary of State's approach. But first of all, paragraph 27. heading responsibilities, pollution planning control separate but complementary, pollution concerned with controllers concerned with preventing pollution, use of measures to prohibit or release substances to the lowest practicable level, we've dealt with that already. It also ensures that ambient air and water quality meet standards that guard against impacts to the environment and human health.
Yes.
In implementing the Waste Incineration Directive and setting standards, do you see the Secretary of State here in this guidance adopting any different approach than the approach we've earlier identified from the Waste Incineration Directive itself?
I don't know.
And in this instance, in the application of the standards and the setting of the limits, can you tell the Inspector, please, are there any indications that the agency has failed to have regard to, for example, health impacts?
No.
Then Mr. Fraser's questions necessarily engage with the issue. He says there's, as you put it, no safe levels. If we go to paragraph 30 of PBS 10, paragraph 30 is very familiar and effectively recites a part of guidance that we're going to come to a bit later on about modern, well-regulated, so on, facilities. Paragraph 31 tells us that where concerns about health are raised, WPA should avoid carrying out their own detailed assessment of epidemiological and other health studies. Rather, ensure through drawing from government advice and research, consultation, advice on the implications for health, if any, when determining planning applications, consider the locational implications of such advice. Is the Secretary of State there inviting local planning authorities to embark on their own consideration of studies and their own consideration of the extent to which, for example, nitrogen dioxide at any particular level might be harmful?
No.
And in this instance, as between the health advice that's available, and we're going to look at specific elements of it in a few moments, we've got health advice from the HPA and the local health authority.
We do, yes.
And is that guidance as between the local health authority and the National Health Protection Agency consistent as to the absence of effect of this proposal, or are they inconsistent?
No, they are consistent.
You may not be able to answer this question immediately, but it's something I'm going to ask you to look at nonetheless. You need to go back to Core Document 150.
Yes, and again.
Well, I shouldn't put it. Well, yes, put it away from me. Hopefully, you and others will be sufficiently familiar with it that you won't need to actually refer to it again. But do NG, please, Core Document 150. I can't help you because I didn't spot which file it was in. Blue NG, the inspector's consideration of air quality started at section 10.3 on page 41. Now, I know you've looked at this before, Mr. Oakham, but in Blue NG, was there an allegation of actual harm to health being made?
There was, as I recall.
So it wasn't, in other words, just a perception?
No,
Yes.
so I'm just trying to find the purported reason for review. I think it wasn't actually refused, it was appealed on non-determination.
Yeah.
There was a specific reason for refusal on air quality.
Yes. And harm arising from actual harm.
Yes.
The next thing, looking at section 10.3, and particularly those parts where the inspector was considering the health effects on the local population, have you been able to identify any reference to guidance from the Health Protection Agency effectively signing off this facility in the circumstances of this case? Can you recollect
I don't
it?
recollect seeing it.
With regard to Blue NG, can you recollect seeing any reference to the existence of an environmental permit granted by the Environment Agency?
I can't know.
Mr. Oakham, in your view as someone dealing with air quality and matters arising from it, what significance would you attach, first of all, to the absence of a consideration of a proposal by the Environment Agency and the absence of an environmental permit?
There are 2 points. So firstly, the fact that the developer in this case has chosen not to apply for environmental permits in advance of planning is their decision, something that can be done. But it means that the Environment Agency would not have analysed this proposal.
And if the agency have analysed a proposal as they have in this case, against a background of protecting both the environment and human health, but in another case not undertaken such an examination, what, if any, significance would you attach to that with regard to human health considerations?
And the significance I would attach it means that another regulatory body has reviewed this and come to a conclusion.
Likewise, with regard to the HPA, the HPA, we know from paragraph 31 of DPS 10, have a specific remit, yes?
They do, yes.
Effectively, to advise local planning authorities of what view should be taken about the likely health effects of a proposal.
Yes.
In circumstances where health, either as to perception or actual is in play, how relevant is it in your view that the HPA may not have expressed a view?
I think it is actually a bit less relevant. The fact that the HPA didn't express a view may mean that they didn't consider it was sufficiently, that they needed to express a view. So I think the absence of an HPA view is not as significant as the absence of a permit.
But in terms of a consideration of health effects, absent an HPA view, would the Inspector and Secretary of State have had any advice from the relevant authorities with regard to potential health effects?
I assume that at some point in the process, the health authority would have made some comments.
Yes, I was thinking rather of the national.
They wouldn't know anything national on that.
Thank you. Then, with regard to a matter we've touched on already, but it arose in a slightly different context later on with regard to air quality, we need to look at the state of common ground. Appendix 4. And if you would, at the same time, have out Mr. Watson's proof of evidence, the plan on page 93, please. These are at different scales. The State of Common Ground plan and Mr. Watson's plan at different scales, but happily, where the air quality management area crosses the canal, on the north side, there's some fairly distinctive bits of equipment that allow one to see where it is on Mr. Watson's plan the air quality management area would be crossing.
Yes, that's right.
Mr. Richards, I'm not going to go through the exercise in detail because, as to borrow Mr. Fraser's expression, you've got as good as eyes as we have. You could follow it. But when we do that on Mr. Watson's map, and we see we'll put a notional line through where the air quality management area is crossing. Do you remember Mr. Fraser drew attention yesterday particularly to what he described as the sticking out bit of the Barton area?
So the bit to the west?
Yeah, the bit to the east there, the protrusion.
That wasn't the bit I was putting.
Oh, right. Right, well, let me deal with that first.
In the west, actually.
Right,
Mr. Oaten recognised.
Yes.
I'm going to deal with both anyway. The bit to the west, does that appear to be inside or outside the air quality management area?
So now which bit are you now?
I'm so sorry, east. The bit to the east.
The protruding bit.
The protruding bit.
Yes, okay. So that bit is not within the air quality management area, I would say.
That's the bit where we see Barton printed in blue, that's the bit.
Yes, So that's the air quality management area does go out to the left.
And then the bit to the west, yes, on the State of Common Ground plan.
Yes.
I know that you've looked at this because your robotic proof of evidence produces figures about Southall and the extent to which the area around Blue NG was densely populated. Do you recollect? You produced
I produced
maps.
some maps, and Mr. Simmons produced some other
Figures. You produced the maps showing, in essence, the densely populated area. Yes?
Yes.
When we look at the State of Common Ground plan, we can see that the area of housing to which reference is made has, on this plan, open areas above it to the north and open areas to the south.
Yes.
Does this look like a densely populated area in the same way that the area around Blue NG was densely populated?
Looking at the wider area around it, though, which was densely populated, I'm not sure I can comment as to how densely populated this is.
All right. No, I'm content with your general answer. Thank you. Thank you. You can put those two plans to one side. A little later on, Mr. Fraser put to you, in the context of still nice and dioxide, that scientists continue to, the scientific community has not arrived at an acceptable level for nitrogen dioxide, and you said they continue to look. And it was put to you that there was a clear and sound basis for seeing air quality improve. And your response was, well, in essence, that would close the whole area down in development terms.
Yes, I think I said that.
Yes. I want to ask you, please, on the basis of what you know as to what has been happening with planning applications both in Trafford and in Salford, which have implications for air quality. What approach has the Council been taking? An approach consistent with Mr. Fraser's question, that no planning application would be granted if it would have any detrimental effect on air quality, or has it continued to grant planning applications even though they have adverse implications for air quality?
Both councils have continued to grant applications which may have adverse impact on air quality, or at least may lead to nitrogen dioxide levels increasing, and may lead to those levels increasing within the AQMA.
Thank you. Next, please, I'd like you to take up the Environment Agency's decision document. This is to deal with a point that arose with regard to the extent to which the agency had or had not taken into account the chemistry module, as it were, by a backdoor route. And it's the text, I think, at page 65 of the decision document.
Yes.
And this was text which was pointed out was very similar to text in the environmental statement.
Yes.
Though I think, and I'm not sure whether Mr. Fraser pointed it out, the wording at the end, so it would have a negligible contribution to the exceedance of the EQS. Can you tell me by reference to the environmental statement whether that's the agency's wording or...
I don't think that wording appears in the environmental
the
statement.
environmental statement? Just check.
Check that. This is paragraph 12.197.
That's correct.
And you are correct to say that the equivalent wording in the Act stops at concentration. So it would is not in the environmental statement.
So the words, so it would have a negligible contribution to the exceedance of the EQS. Whose judgment is that being applied to whatever information is being considered?
That would appear to be the Environment Agency's wording, and that would presumably be their judgment.
Thank you. Now, the point that's being made is, I think, in essence, well, that these figures assume the use of the chemistry module.
Yes.
I'd like you to look back, please, in the decision document, if you would, to page 29. And on page 29, do you see 522, which is a continuation of 5.2, the air quality assessment that started at page 28?
Yes.
On page 29, 522, there's a section, impact from the nitrogen dioxide chemistry module. Yes?
There is, yes.
And it starts by telling us the applicant predicts a maximum long-term process contribution of the worst affected residential receptor in the AQMA of 1.7% of the AQS, and so cannot be screened out as insignificant. This is based on a conservative conversion rate of 70% of nitrogen oxide to nitrogen dioxide.
Yes.
Yes. Now, that conservative conversion rate, if we put it in other language, does that mean you're adopting a worst case assumption or a best case assumption? By conservative, do they mean worse or better? Robust
Well,
or...
strictly, the worst case is 100%. So conservative is making a robust assumption. So in the context of this assessment, it's meaning that the nitrogen dioxide concentrations predicted using that will be higher than you would actually expect to see.
Right. So it's robust from the point of view of protecting health and the environment, robust in the right way. The next paragraph goes on to say that the chemistry module has been used, and the bottom of the page, we've not accepted dates, yes? Not accepted the use of the chemistry module, yes? But if you go to the top of the next page, page 30, however, do you see the conservative conversion rate of nitrogen oxide to nitrogen dioxide of 70% remains valid in this instance, with the process contribution being slightly above the screening out threshold for significance of 1.7% of the AQS.
Yes.
So what approach were the agency taking? They may have rejected the use of the chemistry module, but were, for practical purposes, were they rejecting or accepting an approach which used the conservative conversion factor and arrived at the figure of 1.7%?
They were accepting that.
And in terms of the judgment made on page 65, so it would have a negligible contribution to the exceedance of the EQS. Is that judgment consistent or inconsistent with the judgment based on not using the chemistry module but adopting the conservative conversion factor at page 30?
It's the same conclusion that they came to using the 70% factor for the emissions from the plant. So I guess it's consistent in that sense.
Thank you. Mr. Fraser went on from that point to cross-examine you about the cumulative effects. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's one additional matter in relation to that aspect, and that involves you getting the report to committee, please. 46, court document 46, yeah. If you go, please, to paragraph 60. Paragraph 60 begins the section which is considering the September 2011 addendum.
Yes.
Over the page, paragraphs 63 and 64. 63 deals with investment in assessment pollution control measures, means that the difficulties posed by proximity to the AQMA can also be overcome. Demonstrated appropriate boiler design, and at the end of the paragraph, applicant now demonstrated, and so on. Did the local authorities, licensing and pollution control team, and Dr. Mark Bromfield from AEA accept the appropriateness of using your chemistry module?
They did, yes.
We've dealt with it before, and indeed, as I pointed out earlier, the report to committee dealt with it. But is Dr. Bromfield experienced in these matters?
Yes, yes.
Paragraph 64. Due to the site's location, initial assessment relied on achieving an unusually low emission concentration of oxide of nitrogen, which was considered considered potentially difficult to achieve, and as a result of degree uncertainty on this issue, applicant has now produced additional information reduces the uncertainty. The range of information now provided by manufacturers is sufficient to give confidence NOx emission levels can be achieved in practice. The applicant has provided additional information which verifies that projected ammonia emissions can also be achieved in practice. But was that the same or different information which was submitted to the Environment Agency and satisfied there?
The answer actually is, having now look, this relates to the January 2012 Schedule 5 submission I referred to earlier, which includes the information provided to the local authority. It also includes the additional information I've mentioned relating to the Western Woods, and includes slightly extra paragraphs around the first point. So it's the same information, slightly extended to the Environment Agency.
So the Environment Agency had the same information with the extensions you referred to.
Yes.
But as to the information that was provided to the authority and considered by them and their consultants, we can see from paragraph 64, does there appear to be any caveat about its acceptability?
No, they were satisfied with that.
And then if you would, paragraph 66 by way of the conclusion. The September addendum also includes new information on other aspects of the study and provides a margin of safety on the assessments undertaken. The pollution and licensing team believes the increases the confidence the Council can have in the overall assessment. Provided additional information, the proposal will have an insignificant impact, subject to restrictions being included in the permit, refusal not to stay.
Yes.
Is there anything there, Mr. Oaten, which indicates that either the Council's experienced licensing pollution control team or their independent consultant regarded your approach, and in particular the conclusions reached from it, as being inappropriate?
No, there isn't. That is referring to the fact that at the stage of the February addendum, they felt that they needed some more information on the worst case nature of the adoptions. But no, there's nothing there which suggests they have a problem.
Right. Thank you. Then we're going to go. I'm not sure when you want to take a break.
I'll leave that to you.
Now's the time.
Okay. Right. We'll break for 15 minutes. It'll be 11:25.
Thank you.